So, today, like I said, we're thinking about fasting. We've been thinking about feasting over the last few weeks, but today I want us to think about fasting. And like you might have hopefully picked up, fasting, I think, is all about making room for Jesus in our lives. And so actually, in that sense, fasting is also about feasting as well, because fasting makes room in our life for more of God, for more of Jesus, and so actually it allows us to feast on Jesus more. It allows us to feast on the love that he has for us more. It allows us to feast on the peace that he wants to give us more. Think of it a bit like this. I wonder if anyone has a really messy room. Are we good at keeping rooms tidy or messy? Stick your hand up if you've got a messy bedroom. Quite a few people. Who's got Lego all over the floor? Anyone? I wonder if you've ever had a clear out at home, whether your parents maybe have made you tidy your bedroom, get rid of some stuff. Perhaps you've looked round your bedroom and you realize there's just so much stuff. Maybe it's things that you've made at school and you've brought home and kind of put on a shelf somewhere. Maybe it's old toys that no longer work or you've grown out of, but you don't really want to get rid of them. And so every so often, it's really good to have a clear out to make some space. My wife Vicky tells stories of how her mum would literally come in. I hope she's not watching. Literally come in with a black bin, shove it with some toys when she wasn't watching and go out. But I'm sure that won't happen to anyone here at all. But so often it's good to have a bit of a clean out to make room for new stuff. And that's also really good to do in our own lives as well. We sometimes cram so much stuff into our lives. We might be busy doing homework. We might have after-school clubs. We might have people we need to see. And we can get busier and busier. And there's that box set and that TV program we've got to catch up. And there's always something interesting to look at on the phone. And before we know it, we've filled our life with stuff. And so fasting is like having a bit of a clear out. Fasting is a way that Jesus gives us that can help us make space and make room for God. To get rid of all the things that might be a bit broken, or the things that make us sad, or the things that we struggle with, and the things that we don't really need in our lives as much as we sometimes think we do. So I want you just to imagine that this bucket, it's quite heavy, represents us. A lot of lads, I go, God, why is he making that look so difficult? I want you to imagine that this bucket represents us, and it's full of things. Maybe it's the sports you do. Maybe it's the clothes you buy. Maybe it's your favorite toys. Maybe it's your hobbies. Maybe it's your work. Maybe there's all kinds of other things that you've filled your life with, just like this bucket of sand. Now I'm going to try and pour some water into that. So let's see if this works. Oh dear. It's nowhere near your guitar, Jacob, you're fine. For a little bit, the water fills the bucket. But because that bucket is so full of other stuff, there's nowhere for the water to go, really. And so as you pour water on, what happens is that it overflows, it runs off. There's no room left in this bucket. Fasting is a way to make room for Jesus and put him first in our life. It's about emptying ourselves and giving things up so that there's room for God to come and to fill us. When we fast, we give up things that we don't need so that we can focus on God. So it might be that if you're an adult, you might want to consider having a day a week where you give up just one meal. Or if you're a child or a teenager, we wouldn't suggest necessarily that you gave up food, but it might be that you say, one day when I come home from school, one day a week, before I jump on the TV or the Xbox or whatever it is, I'm just going to take 10 minutes to maybe read a Bible story, or maybe just to say a quick prayer with mum or dad or gran or whoever's looking after you. It might be that giving up screen time would be a good thing for a lot of us, actually. And the idea of giving something up is that as we make room and pour out all the stuff in our lives, what we end up doing is making a lot more room for Jesus. We end up making much more room. I'll be careful here, Jacob. We end up making much more room for Jesus, for our lives to be filled with him and for him. And so when we fast, when we say we're going to carve out some time, we're going to make some space for Jesus, what he does is he fills us with his love, his strength, and his power. And so that means we can feast more on Jesus. Fasting is feasting more on Jesus. Now, the point of giving something up isn't just so you feel good about yourselves and can kind of show off. That's what the passage we read is saying. That's not the point of fasting. The idea is that we use the time, the space that we would have spent eating or maybe on screens to find God in a different way, to focus not on those things to meet our needs, but to focus on our Father in heaven who knows our needs and will meet them. Dallas Willard, writer, says this: fasting confirms our utter dependence on God by finding in him a source of sustenance beyond food. In fasting, we learn what it means to suffer happily as we feast on God. So why fast? Well, some of the benefits of fasting is that it gives us more time to pray. Some of the benefits of fasting is that it demonstrates to God actually how serious we are about the things we're praying of. It demonstrates the depth of our faith and the depth of what we long to see. It's kind of easy to pray, but I think there's something about fasting that says to God, I'm serious about this. My desire for the things I'm praying is so much, it weighs on me so heavily that actually I need to create more space so that you can come and do more in my life. I think as well that fasting releases God's supernatural powers. We create more space for God to come and move. We see him, as he does all the way through the Bible, defeating evil, answering prayers, bringing his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And in our passage today, Jesus says, when you fast. He doesn't say if you fast. And it's part of a pattern as followers of Jesus, as God's people. Jesus assumes in this little section that his followers will give, will pray, and will fast. He says, when you give, when you pray, when you fast. Now, don't get me wrong, God doesn't need you to fast. You're not giving up a cheeseburger for his name. But the act of fasting is running to God to meet all your needs, not the other way round. And much like prayer and tithing, God doesn't need our resources. You're not doing him a favor. But he wants them. Because he knows that where our resources are, where our time is, where our prayers are, that's where your heart is. And that's what God is after. God is after your heart. So this week, as a community gathered together, this morning we're going to feast together after this service. But then after that, for the next 2 weeks, from now until the 9th of October, I'd love to invite you to fast in some way. The next 2 Sundays are our Vision and Giving Sundays. We're going to be thinking all about what does it mean to be a community of faith here in Lincoln? What are the things that God is calling us to do, the people he's calling us to be. We'd love you to invite you to fast and to pray and to give for the life of our church here, for Lincoln and for Lincolnshire. Just going to have a little photo come up. This last week, we joined the staff team here, joined with the staff team in St. Mark's Grimsby, which is a church we planted a year ago. You can't see it very well, but in the middle, there's maps of Lincolnshire, loads of different Ordnance Survey maps of Lincolnshire. Around the edge are the staff teams, and in the middle is a big fishing net. And what we were doing is we were just starting off this 2 weeks by just praying together, praying that God would cover Lincolnshire with his love, praying that God would bring freedom to people across Lincolnshire, praying that God would bring many to him across Lincolnshire. Because we long to see God's Spirit poured out, not just filling us, but actually, if I've left enough water, which I haven't, there's a bit in here, not just filling us, but actually beginning to overflow to the people, to the streets, to our schools, to our places of work around us. So it all kicks off with a feast today, but we'd love to invite you, whether you're a child, whether you're a teenager, whether you're an adult who'd still like to be a teenager, whether you're a little bit older, we'd love to invite all of you this week and next to fast, to pray and to fast and to consider your giving, that God would come and pour out his Spirit. If we want to see a move of God, do we want to see a move of God? Yeah. 3 of you do, fantastic. Do we want to see a move of God? Yes. We do. We need to make room for Jesus, and we do that through fasting, through praying, through giving. But this next 2 weeks, have a think. How could you fast? How could you pray? Ben, you better come and clear up, mate.